So, Tashi Dilig, everyone. Tashi Dilig, it's the greeting in Tibetan.
So, will you also say it back then?
Yes. Sule Tashi Dilig and Laurabes.
Okay.
So, we start the session with a prayer, page number 6. Judan Zoji Jona Lai Chanju Badu Dani Jazuji Dagi Jin Zoji Be Tsonam Jin Dolai Benji Sanji Dubari Shu Sanji Chida Zoji Jona Lai Chanju Badu Dani Jazuji Dagi Jin Zoji Be Tsonam Jin Dolai Benji Sanji Dubari Shu Sanje Cheda Tsuji Chuna Lai Chanju Bade Dani Chesu Dagi Jinsu Jibi Tsunam Jin Dolai Benji Sanje Dubai Shu Sumjen Tangji Dewa Dan Dewe Judan Dembar Ji Dunye Da Dunye Ge Judan Dewa Ji Dunye Mebe Dewa Damba Dan Min Dewa Ji Yerian Chada Nidan Dewe Danyan Chenpo La Nebar Ji Sumjen Tangji Dewa Dan Dewe Judan Dembar Ji Dunye Da Dunye Ge Judan Dewa Ji Dunye Mebe Dewa Damba Dan Min Dewa Ji Yerian Chada Nidan Dewe Danyan Chenpo La Nebar Ji Sumjen Tangji Dewa Dan Dewe Judan Dembar Ji Dunye Da Dunye Ge Judan Dewa Ji Dunye Mebe Dewa Damba Dan Min Dewa Ji Yerian Chada Nidan Dewe Danyan Chenpo La Nebar Ji
Di tanda dashi do do kranzala de dura jitola sanje season do
Yori.
kranzala na da ni tanda hakone abuda.
So when we recite the prayer, since there already exists the English translation side by side with the Tibetan, then maybe it's good to reflect on what exactly is the meaning of these prayers.
네 당한 저 당보들 가상기 좋아지라. 그 가시 진도 아니 질레 셀란도라. 대신에 아무도 상도. 아니 당한 저 미치기 좋아라. 미사와치기래더라. 알거니. 다케문도 당보 가상 저 뒤지들라. 콘도길네 도지. 문디죠.
Yes. So before we actually begin to discuss the actual text itself, I want to take some time to address the sharings that we had yesterday in the session.
네, 근데 미치 칼라나 코랑 찌빠로 치 아니 랩달라 직럽지 지기스라 랩 하나 지기라나
럽다 진중
다른 데서 이제 아부팀다 아니 코나 찌빠잉인데 손 다시 당한도 저와 가르쳐와 있느라 지기래가 가리는 담보라 치에데 베케 첨보래 아니 하버드 찌빠로 있는 찌기 된다라 수수기 미츠나로라 찌 담보탄세다 아니 하산난다 치에데 케첨라 랍적인 젠조지나 다 수수기 미츠나로라 지당게 내가 가르치나 라샬 땅오르데 라찬데 마인바 다 랍적인 젠조이 부구도줄라 마음바 아니 지게 미약보 차야다 아니 지 코랑 미츠나로라 강에메 봤어야다 아니 지게 슈솔라오나 패톤 수도는데 야시라 대좀마드는 네마치야지 차야라 아니 부구라 라준체 랍자테고 옛날에 디나레지 기게도 마보여라 도줄라 아니 땅지치야체 아니 찌르 가르치는 거라게 나초라 다 사바인라도 아니 가르치는 디그레스 따디네다 나초라 사바이나 담부 지 뎁든도 고레일 하보시라 담보는 뎁 타보드는 장와이나 안 남사 따디 시사마르스는 센슈차이다 담보 뎁 고레일 하보 레일 하보로 니라 베나 춘주도 야보르 레일 하보 아니 데마이게 다 군두고 숭든도 원도즈 인지다 힌디다 다 간지ton라이르 데네 춘주는 로 아니 로야 처처드나 지 레바디 가르시 시세드 쳇드나 야야론 셴바네 담보네 뎁 침보지 키고 타보지로는 고치에 맞아 데네베다니 마라시라 원데리치.
So one of us shared that they work as an accountant and they also run a school. So with regards to any activity that we undertake in our lives, it is important that we approach it with integrity and honesty. And especially since you share that you run a school, then I think this is a huge responsibility that a school should be an environment wherein a young child is being equipped with the skills to face the challenges of society, and a young child should also be educated with the inner values, with the core human values, which can help them to become a good human being. And they also shared that they are new to Buddhism and Buddhist practices. So as such, someone who is new to Buddhism, I would always give them this advice, that even though within the Buddhist spiritual practices and philosophy, there exist many difficult and many high-level practices and so forth. As a beginner, it is important that you approach what you want to study about Buddhism from a foundational level. So as such, at the outset, it is important to address texts which are accessible, which are easy for you to understand, because immediately if you begin to reach for high-level practices, then this will demotivate you in the long run. So it's better to approach and build a foundational understanding of Buddhism by approaching simple and accessible texts. And I would recommend particular texts such as Bodhicharya Avatara, Engaging the Deeds of Bodhisattva by Shantideva. And there are many practical and accessible texts written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and you can find them in many different languages.
대단한 맞아. 군두에 대 지고 많이게 다 사장님 말기로 된 개발은도 군주가 그냥 레일 하거든 이러라. 어떤 짓지다 체. 아니 가서 단단 얘기 때 말해야 미치글에 저어 말아. 찍을래 지단 미치길 내리대 아니 좀 참하게 대 칼로 사나다야다 줄 펜토라 대치지 아니 단단 미니래가 제일 터팅이라 거기 제일 미래다 아니 단단 가서 단단 시에데 가서 미 군주기 간절라 삼수시에다 아니 코랑이 가르장이 미유디 깨지티네 디길랜드 어디시기라 니하고 말아.
So not just the works of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, there are many books written by many teachers from the many different Tibetan traditions, such as the teachers from the Nyingma and Kagyu and Sacha lineages, and all of them have written texts which are aimed to educate beginners on the Buddhist practices and Buddhist philosophy. Now, as I address these sharings, please do not take it as if I'm addressing one particular person only, because as I address this, I think that it will be also helpful for all of you to kind of understand the approach you need to take towards the study and practice of Buddhism if you are someone new to these. And now, some of you have joined us today, and just to keep you in the loop, we asked the group what is the expectations with which they are approaching the course, and after we address these sharings, we would also like to hear from you about your expectations.
아니 다 미니바디 칼라나 코랑게 생각을 별로 좀 시기라다. 안디 다 배워버려. 지단에 그때 생강 리바 레디가 ngazu nambe chude chita 생강 리바를 티도 송구다 근데 라 도도 지단게 세리기 토래 칼라나 시 ngobo 라 잘라딘데 따지 제je 당가서 시시는 따야죠 라 도졸라 심주 치고라 당가서 생강 리바라데 셈 나로게 아니 셈기 조한다 답변은 못하던 데자 시랑도 간데 찌기도 간데 방고 지나 생강 리바다 세리기 디테스 템벌라다 라 근데 인데 아니 따처럼 단데 생강 리바 자와네 지단게 남베기 나출에 다 집어로 책이서라 대체 아니 다 밀레 삼지 지에라 코랑게 매준치기라사 다 남추 돌시는 가지고 상치고 셈래 대충 제래 주니라 배나 다신냠제래다 아니 유네명아 되고 니시고라 단데 창하게 배네 삼시 지에래 대파지 다신냠제는 레이도 소도 소라 나를 되고 빠나 초콜레 고르네 가지고 대상기 계시는 커먼 센스 레이다 라 지금 ngazu chama chibayin bada ani chiksana ta jachim boro de tanda sansi chela de chik phasho pula dewan de bana che ngaya dewan de phasho pula dungye mende bana che ngaya dungye mende bar dinde gi chi chung ta thuni ra ani dinde ina ani kosansi rashi le do da ngachi bo den de ngachi bo den de shamba sanamata na ngazu sansi che yamara ra dinde inde de be tanda ngazu shangchu sengi jini na lo chik de ne chwe de ni do che do do mituni che da 아니 가서 가와 도와이나 가서 밑 참아 찌바이마 심제 참아 대원도 봐도 동이 문제 찌좀 따투나 고란식 레옹다 와 소소케면 찌고 마연게 근데 산다 찌체 다 아니 라네래 아니 니리니리 카유라이 펜토 지 제약 삼지 송다 티칼은 딱 가서 니리니리 라네드 가서는 가서 쪼디 쇼기 알람바도 고다 많이 받아 가서 취수니 사시어 다티 표주 간 땅원이라 니마치게 나로래 아니 지밀레 페마도나 담 알레 네마제체 펜토나데 야시시라 아니 조딩은 저기 드나 데나 사나 통나 먼저기 룽아이스 고디 딱지체 백해점다 예산은 간데스다도 니 계시디 간데치 칙도 간데 표지당이도 라 아니 니 밀레 남지테나 류기 남지테나 미 마가오로 밀레 남지베 칼로 지나 사오드네 땡기데 다 소소절 따지체데 백해점다 드즈바이나 아니 가서 카유 라이게 다 밀레 늦체 마제게
So moving on, one of us shared that they are studying psychology, and now His Holiness the Dalai Lama always makes the point that when we are talking about the study of the mind, then Buddhism has something to offer to the Western study of psychology, and that they are in some ways compatible. Because when we look at the Buddhist practice and Buddhist philosophy, then there is a huge part of it which deals with the study of the mind. And as such, we refer to it as the inner science. And it is indeed the case that when we look at modern science, it seems to place a lot of emphasis on empirical evidence based on on the external world. And even though Buddhism and modern science are common in placing emphasis on empirical evidence, but the area where they operate seems a little bit different. Whereas modern science places a lot of importance on developing the external world, and the whole task of a Buddhist practitioner is to develop the inner world, or the mind, so to say. And but with that being said, I think if you study the Buddhist presentation on mind, then I think it could be really compatible with your study of psychology. And with that, they also touched upon how Buddhism seems to place a lot of emphasis on empathy. And this is particularly true because when we are talking about core Buddhist practice, such as developing the awakening mind of bodhicitta, an altruistic intention which wants to be of service to all sentient beings, then we talk about two ways in which we can generate such an altruistic intention. A motivation which wants to help and benefit all sentient beings. So one method is through the process of what we call equalizing and exchanging the self for others. And this, in a sense, is what empathy is. wherein wherein it touches upon a very realistic appreciation of reality based on our own experience, that as I am a human being, as I am a sentient being, I do not want suffering, and others do not want suffering either. As I am a human being, I want happiness, so others want happiness too. And now from one perspective, this is basic common sense to extend that kind of motivation to others too. Just as you yourself wouldn't want to suffer and want happiness for yourself, we need to also appreciate that others also want happiness and do not want suffering. Now, if we are to generate such an altruistic intention, then we cannot do without accepting this commonality that we have with all sentient beings. We need to accept it, radically accept this fact that all of us are similar in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. If we are able to let our motivations be informed by this, then we can begin to develop an empathy in all facets of our interactions, in all facets of our lives. Now, when we say that we want to inculcate these practices in our daily lives, then I think at the least one must operate from the ethical consideration that if I am not able to be of help or benefit to others, I would at least not harm, at least not actively harm others. This is the basic kind of ground from which you must operate. Even if you cannot be of service and help to others, you would not actively harm them. And if we are to adopt such an ethical consideration in the way in which we live our daily lives, then it is important that in the 24 hours that we have 24 hours that we have in a day, that we pay attention to our mind, to the thoughts that arise in our mind, to the speech that we engage in, to the attitudes that we have, and to the actions that we engage in physically. So as such, we Buddhists, as practitioners, place a lot of importance on what we call ethical restraint in not engaging in the 10 non-virtuous actions of the body, speech, and mind.
Monkey mind like the same juju. And the anjo which you call Namsa de Judo, Timaji turning on the Lamsadim, sympathy should dress it. And then on the chicken, Zubola Zure, Karana, Namsa de Shoulder. Ani Kanji manjing on the Ombungaira, Zudatiro Rejag, just Judora. Today, the Chitan on the same lang, so Tati Chiada. Kesi is same that the Maya soon to pay Kasakal Chamdi, say Machan, say Abushatua, Bizuchia. Right. Zamda chana yang same kajuma machan la yang so ya kusu tobo sanam ju tene de la omara so semba e chibu che sangam lele che ani chitang ngu mis thamala chashi re lega yore so le den dam ne di ta ta chigura ine nga lele de le lega sama yoye marte so kantu chidu bezo che ke chambu che ine semba la ngam da ma shira da kisin zamzang lega chama druba yo gare mandu digala ta nga de lega de dru ma so na ngam da khashi shul ngam da chida 근데 제만 제일 비즈니스 제를 인간들 내가 가르치는 루비 잡아요 말아 이내 수준 비즈니스 해야 되겠지 뭐다 아니 저도 생각을 해야 되겠지 뭐다 나 아주 될때 하고 맞아 지난 시종은 남을 때 같이 내가 지 누나 한 사야지가 베드 가야 만든 베 니자 계도로지 지금 만디는 베 슈부지마 빠싱되라 되네 만지 아주 샘들 때 칼로다 땅형도 샤도냐 보다라 베드 가디 가타 두두두타만 게 딱다로 샤야디 백해첨보다 미 트레일러에 간지 돈을 미기 따내래 소소 진도나 대나 차샤 가를 때는 들 펜도 첨보다.
So when we are talking about psychology or study of the mind, then I think it is important to look at the mind and begin to observe how exactly does what arises in the mind, how the mental states affect our lives. Now, when we look at our minds, we can appreciate and relate to the fact that most of the time our minds are very easily agitated, our minds become easily excitable, and as such we use terms such as monkey mind. It's distracted easily, it's agitated easily, it's very easily excitable. For example, more often than not, it is distracted towards sensory objects because we are for most of the time distracted towards pleasures that we derive from the senses, sensory pleasures. And as such, our minds become easily distracted by a sound that we hear, by a form that appears in front of us, and as such, it becomes easily distracted. And then we do not know how to regulate the mind. We do not have any sense of control over our mind. Now, the approach that a Buddhist practitioner takes is to observe this first, the manner in which the mind becomes easily excited, easily agitated, and then work towards overcoming this manner in which the mind becomes disturbed. Now, as such, we call this practice restraining the sense doors, that we do not let our minds become easily distracted towards sensory objects. Now, this does not mean that by restraining these sense doors, we are not open-minded at all. This is not what we mean. We all have plans, we all have works, and as such, a lot of things indeed does run around in our heads. We have a lot of thoughts about what we want to do, what we are doing. Now, it shouldn't be the case that this kind of makes us anxious. It shouldn't be the case that these thoughts that we have makes us stressed all the time. So the Buddhist approach is to cultivate a sense of being open-minded, which takes into account all possibilities. That whatever plans you might make, there is no guarantee that it might work, but you put in the best of your efforts. And if the result does not turn out as you expected it to, then you are not so disappointed because you already were open-minded enough to accommodate that possibility from the start. So this is the manner in which one develops their attitude and motivations. Because it is indeed the case that many times the way that we approach our plans and the things that we want to do, we place and project all our expectation onto the situation. And then we expect it to turn out as we wish it. And when things do not turn out the way that we want, then we have extreme reactions. And even if things do turn out in the way that we want to, then we also have an extreme reaction. So much that you are not able to contain your sense of joy at one point. You are not able to make sense of it, come to terms with it. And the opposite is also true. When it doesn't turn out the way that you want to, then you are extremely discouraged, extremely disappointed. So the approach is to learn to observe the mind, then to exercise and regulate how exactly the mind works, and then to have an approach of equanimity towards the plans that we have, towards the activities that we undertake in our lives, so that we do not suffer as a consequence of our reaction.
Pina nge pe shaura ngema ngatombo tanang ti khombe jablo dewara nyeme building wala ra tiba singna do che ani jiunda mler tangan jamda shogi yalla ani khande pe chi gi shul de ya ta jiu de ke ta mar jagda tel nawate de na su khande che ma the ra ken da ma da sang de da dang da ma do ra khashi chinju khashi nyembo khashi subo khashi chikji le ke tang ye so do ra dinde ji la nga pa semba ji ba yi de na 수기 대ብ는 따오는 된다 산다에 봐셔. 근데 칸데야 붙이 제마요도 시다. 당아도 띠끌로 빼천로라. 뜻자가 원래 그렇게 가르잖아요. 제가 가르치는데 남이 땅 수 대블로야 되가 막 너디디가 디 버르들 잡고 고문다. 그렇게 가르잖아. 봐. 근데 대수기 남들가랑 저기 소소소소 지고에 직술로 반 주다 들어를 봐 때잖아. 아니 나도 쌤도 파참 수디마도라. 소소 레는 가린다 또 제실로 같이 이제 남이로 샤잖아.
So the point that I'm making at this point is that if we as spiritual practitioners indeed want to transform our minds, indeed want to subdue our minds, and indeed want to train our minds, then we cannot do without training our attention first. Because if our attentions are always distracted, easily distracted by sensual pleasures, sensory objects, then we cannot really dedicate our attention towards a spiritual practice. And I will share a personal incident just to highlight this. So, where I stay in Thesamling, it's right next to the field, and as such, there are a lot of trees around. And when I make it a point to always get up in the morning and to do my daily recitations outside. And I begin to notice that there are a lot of birds in the nearby trees. Some of the birds, they chirp. Some of them seem almost like they are shouting. Some of them are making mating calls and so forth. And now, if I let my attention be distracted by all these sounds that the birds are making, then I cannot effectively concentrate on what I want to do. That is my recitation. Let alone reflecting on the meaning of these prayers, I'm not able to concentrate enough to see my recitation through. So you have to be able to train your attention to focus on what you want to do. So as I learn to restrain my sense doors to not to be distracted by the chirpings of the birds, then am I able to focus on my prayers. And there comes a point wherein the attention becomes so focused that you are not aware of the sounds that the birds are making. So this is the importance of training our attention in the process of training our minds.
대선 다야마보라 치 카사 시우지우 마이게라 가서 저 폰디 카바디 베지 엄마다나 베 디두다 페나 저 카발치다 디슐로라 치 타카나 산주로 데나타이로 남 담보 안 미긴담라지 통 안주 담라지코 와 아니 디네 준담라고 안가지 디가라 소소야 치 추냠네 제데 카르려가 전에 사모디가라 쇼데나 못다다 치tum다 다 근데 인디가라 다 점점한 저 치기 게외쇼다 치기 내가 야보 제란 점점 뒤서 트라도다 카바딘 직다셔는 거런지도 하고더라. 근데 인디 안에 따든지 따셔서 부근 말에 스트레스를 나오면 지난 아주 생비 참당 생로단들 나와르면서 또 지진 나시면 등 같은 데 시시하게 해고야더라.
So now the example that I shared is quite a harmless one. Now in this day and age, we have something which distracts us all the time in the palm of our hands. We have our phones, and with this phone, all of our sense doors are engaged. Our eyes see something, then our ears begin to hear something, and then our minds become engaged with this. And then even after we are done watching or scrolling through, then our minds are still occupied with thoughts about what we just saw, what we just heard. So this gives rise to a lot of intrusive thoughts and emotions, and this takes up a lot of our times. And there comes a point wherein we become overwhelmed by these intrusive or discursive thoughts and emotions. So this is the importance of training the attention, developing a sense of restraint in the manner in which our minds become distracted by the sense doors. Otherwise, it makes us overwhelmed at one point. And two, it's a waste of time. And these two are related to each other. That time and effort that we could actually dedicate towards something meaningful is taken up by a sense of being overwhelmed, or by wasting our time, wasting our time because our attentions are so scattered all the time.
the mini get to the leja saira the kunila hatra the need to agitate any jilang the jesalan gandashora tindo any paraparala kundula and you do your
So at this point, maybe we make the time to hear from those who didn't share the expectations with which they approach this course. Maybe you would like to share?
I came here to search for inspiration in my practice. I'm a young mother. I have a 2-year-old daughter, which is also why I will only be participating in half of the sessions, and my partner will participate in the other half. So avoid the burnout of practicing and to be inspired to practice while also engaging in a lot of day-to-day behaviors, because I have to do these mundane tasks of cooking and taking care of a child, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to incorporate my spiritual practice and my Dharma practice in my everyday life.
Tini Kurang dila tso yonggoya diyora, ani chik chö nyamlen chiya lara, chö mutu ni nyamlen chiya la loje dawa chiya chido yong yinsra, simshu parma saba dawa chiya chido yong yins, kayinsina Kurang tanda amaji yinsra, ani pumo lo nyi chi ju chi yus, ani ti che zan da Kurang zinda pa tacho wajik nyamshu che togi ma resra, da Kurang gi sandara, ani chega yura. 제가 냠슈체 제네 차시티스라. 아니
카달라스.
데네 아니 참참 아니 냠네 제베 림발라 아니 이탄라 체응고 도스라. 가인스나 아마지인데 좀 보고 춘지질라 쉬었다고라스. 아니 직 내가 자가지기 망보 레고도스. 칼라소야라도 야 부글라 따고야도 왜라. 근데 네 내가 자가지기 망보 레고도 좀 봐니 추기 냠네 라줘라. 직 콩초와도 줘라. 추지 냠네 라데 아니 양타바도지 줍 투기에 나면은 삼삼게 아니 도바도 올리기 도스.
My name is Gal. I've read this text in the past, and I'm curious to hear your reflections about it and your insight.
Tini Kurang mingla gali isra, ani Kurang gi tsawa dingwa ni lo nyonsra, ani tanda Geshema chorangi yora, ani dishe khande chungi yona asra, di tsawa ti. Ti kola ani kodo sawa dawa kari nye na ti, ani shinti dus.
다 단다 디 젤 단다 미시 디네마 미미시 좀 내줘라. 젤 도이 단다 아주 디간 테스트셔라. 나 디치부진 시드네 요라.
So now we were able to address two of the sharings. At this point, we will continue to address this when in between the sessions. But at this point, maybe it's better to approach the actual text itself. Otherwise, you might become a little bit bored.
tatanda anzu dile da jeselane sodem bara chitan shilo ga sunju sodem ma da me ba ine ti na lo ramoni tane zamda anzu a di imala tu dinde le o dinde jamne kawa chi thu le ni se ja ye ra khashine ya ira ja ama ya la la ne re taina dinde je chitan khashin lo nyu samara taina anzu tanda di la tambu de khala na nam garama ju go sha ya sara de
Diji Chushaga Thangpo.
re
So the 37 practices of all the Bodhisattva sattvas by Thokmey Sangpo. Now, as the title itself suggests, the root text itself is made out of only 37 verses. And even though it is brief and comprehensive in that sense, but these practices, if we reflect on them and if we really inculcate this as part of our practice in our daily lives, then they are really indeed profound. As I have taught this text before, there were many different reactions to the text when students begin to read them on their own. Some participants seem to become easily discouraged from the outset, saying that, oh, these practices are a little bit beyond me. I can never practice them, as the text suggests. But others seem to appreciate the fact that these are the practices that one can aspire to. So any kind of reactions is justified, actually. Do you have a copy of the handout? You have?
Okay.
Do.
Tadilara namu loki shore nam loki shore la na ta papa shenrezi shedra tanda ngazo di namo la na chata gi shacha chata sanskrit ji namo buddha namo sangha lai do shacha wala tinde tanda gi shacha gi yudela ani papa shenrezi le shacha jira ani digi ola sholoka de kala kangi chugun do business ta kangi le de chu karin ra chukun de chutada do mizle de chata pat tash tawrishina to tombani le hinsra demba rubagi tsuyumba da pando atne mewa chidangi dile umegi tawala rale do joy deni da ani nyamje da chamadin nalo dini do shidra tinde indi kangi chugun do mizi chans chidangi demba rubagi pede tsuyumba da pando gi tinde ki meba ina yangasra ta tinde ki me kala mizi chans ziba ina ya doye la chik de chunzi pe la digala ta ngazu chike roar do simjen thanje la jora wa dende wi simjen thanje gi thende la chamba jiba chik de tamba de ta da fa lo chik de dimni ra dende gi chamba jebi yes ani suzu ge tsawe lama da ra lama choda jinri zingolas suzu ge tsawe lama juba ni pe na sanje chomde de ni tanda ba ta lama rumba shin le wara 사제기 순서지 디젤라 안에 자가이 펜두도 가 사마루루체 안에 단다바도 있나 아주 라마들라 아주 취 냠슬레거라 아주바니 말로 라마초다 제제 징글라스 따데 대 아니 아주 뒤친주지 뒤튼두실래 마인게 뒤따데 니체 뒤두도 아주라 아니 따데 소 고순 쿠발라데 소 고순 아주 류가이 숨샤사 딘데 아니 페나 luge nga namju gana kubachere nga gole cheba puyada chiki tsi tayere ani ye gole sana yakotani ra lebishon santan tendege ani kubache kasa tad gosun kube sachelo la ta tendege chene ani nge cheba jugi isla.
So the text starts with Namo Lokeshvarya. So Namo means I prostrate or I bow down. Varya herein refers to Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion. So I bow down to the Buddha of compassion. You see that all things are beyond coming and going, yet still you strive solely for the sake of living beings. Now, as it is customary in the classical texts, it starts with an offering of praise to the teachers and the Buddhas and enlightened beings. So the first two lines, and particularly the first line, you see that all things are beyond coming and going. Now, herein immediately we are touching upon a very subtle point, which is the concept of emptiness. And beyond coming and going refers to how things arise or come to be, arising. And going refers to ceasing or disintegration. And herein it touches upon emptiness, and more particularly the interpretation of emptiness on the basis of what is called the middle way, free from extremes. So beyond coming and going, if we are to make sense of this, then we need to add the qualifier. You see that things are beyond truly coming and truly going, truly arising and truly ceasing. Yet still you strive solely for the sake of living beings. So even though you have realized that things are not intrinsically existing, intrinsically ceasing, yet still you strive to be of benefit to all sentient beings. To you, my precious Guru, inseparable from Lord Avalokita, I offer perpetual homage, respectfully, with body, speech, and mind. Now, the third line is an homage to the lineage of teachers. In Buddhism, we place a lot of importance on the lineage of teachings to appreciate what exactly is the source of the teachings. So, the teachings come originally from the Buddha, then to the subsequent Indian masters, then to the subsequent Tibetan masters, and through this lineage of transmission, it survives to this day and age, and we now are able to study it. So the first line, and particularly the last two lines, evokes this lineage of transmission that makes these teachings possible for us to study in this day and age. And then the last line, I offer perpetual homage respectfully with body, speech, and mind. So homage herein refers to prostrating or making an offering with body, speech, and mind. So in Buddhism, we say that a practitioner can begin to make offerings with their body, speech, and mind, not simply with their body. So the offering of body is maybe simple, prostrating in front of the teacher or the enlightened beings. And now speech, then you begin to offer verses of praise. Then mind, you begin to visualize these enlightened beings and these teachers in your mind through a process of visualization.
Katanda di la ta do gosu kube shatse lo la ra. Chidangi nga zi gosu kube ke ta la di gala tizu tundu chi ma yingpa pe tizu la wara. Yine ya tanda nga zi chidangi chidi ya nga zi mila kala monde ma yingke ra. Chigla maro kartu lamsa de la shio ani jela katang ani chidine aba ma ra. Chidanga zi dodan ji namri chimbo dana ma bu shier. Gege ma getu la tawa gege la taba dani ma bu yore. Chidang kaju ma je lamsa chiro she tebaro cha che ya jela chi di mi katang de chi ma tamu susu la ma da chik chat se gi yuro ji sogo ina tambo ta je ya bu che ko karashi gi du korang gi rocha ni du karare do ra ani di nge gi pe ko chik che sun zen sa ji tsin digi de digi mi kesi de ji digi du na ani chik tsana ta chi de ra tela ani chiro juma chen cha ro chik thong ina tadi kalor susu ngana le na mada ge wangi tinde thong ro tinde la ma ngole yo mare sa ni tinde chi lo je khas na so ya chik teba ta na shu je ya de la kha na susu le dibasa ora phajo de la de chin ge na ha masra tinde indi kana susu ge tambo ta ji che pe ke cham susu la ma khande ji teng odo ra chu shu za khare na ta ji che chogor dra odindi che ani tinde indi la ta ti la nganzu gi chik teba ta ta na da chi sha che gor le de la semble joaj no pena khogi pena lamaji ki teb jitawa na ra kharasundu ti khar phengidu ra nganjo yel ngojo ji tu tewe na ko ngone sonje di pe yakpo do chik samna selen rashi ki joaj rotu ina ko lugi namju rashi thayin bar ra chesa nganjo ki to di nganjo semble ra le di gala sengi pa tawang den thuaj ko gi sunju de le nyehe tang to dinde re shadi paja dinde resha naja dinde resha ni dinde lamte dinde yabana semble joje na rashi gi midle kala lu na ju de lansa thaywe jire dra dinde sa de package.
Now at this point, when we look at the last line of the first verse, I offer perpetual homage respectfully with body, speech, and mind. Perpetual, I offer constant homage respectfully with body, speech, and mind. Then maybe you might walk away with the impression that maybe this is just an expression of blind faith, but this is not indeed the case. Even when one is encouraged and instructed to constantly prostrate and bow down and pay homage to your spiritual teachers, who is inseparable from the Buddha or the enlightened beings. This process is a very detailed process, the manner in which one develops faith and one begins to take someone as a teacher, as an object of refuge in the Buddhist practice. Because when we look at the instructions in texts such as Lamrim, the great treatise on the stages of the path, then it is very clear how the student themselves must always question the teacher before taking them on as a teacher, and how it is the responsibility of the teacher also to test and to investigate the ability of the student to listen to the teachings and to understand the teachings. So as participants in this course, it is important that when we are looking at lines such as this, it is not simply an expression of blind faith wherein you are simply kind of making these offerings and paying homage simply out of a sense of faith and devotion. even when we are talking about developing faith and devotion in spiritual teachers, it is the responsibility of the student to take the time to question, to investigate whether this teacher is deserving of your respect, is deserving of your devotion or not, and to always investigate. And after you have carried that investigation, then if you feel that, okay, I can now express my devotion to this teacher, only then are you advised to take them on as a teacher. It is not that you begin to follow every teacher blindly out of a sense of devotion. Now, when we are talking about faith and devotion, when we look at the manner in which a teacher affects us, moves us, motivates us, then it is not exactly the teacher themselves who are moving us and motivating us. It is the teaching of these teachers who moves and motivate us. So as such, it is important to pay attention to the teachings as the main source of inspiration. And based on these teachings, you should be able to rationally investigate, rationally analyze for yourselves, to come to a place of certainty about the meaning of these teachings with regards to what you should abandon, what you should cultivate. And only when you become convinced, when you become certain that these teachings given by these teachers make sense for you, then you are advised to take them on as a spiritual teacher. And then you express your faith and devotion to them. This faith and devotion does not precede your analysis of the teaching.
Shiloga Nibandara, Shiloga Nibadlakan, Pending June, Zubi, Sanje Namsta, Pembada, Devegin June, the other Zunusek, the Junkundra, Tende Zubi Sanje Nams. And Tende Sanje de Courage, Sanje di condition, Pen Sanje Ledigala, Numumba, Ra, Numumbi Dubatanji Sang, Shiji Dubada, Nimum Dubatanji Sani, and me Yunde Yosubara, Tende and Kalota. Sang jail digala sang le ka new mombada chi dibad zuba sang jail digala ani yende yosu zokwa jewala na sang jail tinde wi sanje nam de kharilitte ne chungare la na ani tamchu dule tamchu tambi gi chue nyamne ta pena jing golam namja de nyams len ra lam de salang namja de nyams leni ani tamchu dule chungte este ani tinde wi sanje de chaw chimbu de khandis churasna tamchu Tambi chue nyams lembala tene chungres. Da dinde indi de lane shela rale pe dinde wi ani dinde ina ani ta ngazo tambi chue de khandes dugud. Nyamne khande chew lane khande taw dinde rale ge yechang ani ngazo khalasna jese namchi chitang jese le digala yang dila kor jese chanchu sembala khochora jese namchi lane she par cha le digala dinde jese chanchu sembal namji ge ani nyamne cheya da tunzu ge tangi ma shegi yin le digala ani zomba thamchawa chidang ngazu gi phebe ge te mambo chela da ngema jagan sujesha ji digala gyaga ki da la ya da ani zomba thamchawa da tinde ge dodan chira tande digala ani ge zomba thamchawa la ding ye gita tinde ji shegi yin da na khurang ge kine roje ra ondila shegir.
Now moving on, the second verse. The perfect Buddhas, who are the source of all benefit and joy, come into being through accomplishing the sacred Dharma. And since this, in turn, depends on knowing how to practice, I shall now describe the practices of all the Buddha's heirs. Now, if the first verse is an offering of praise, then the second verse is a promise of composition. Now, this is the manner in which classical texts in Tibetan Buddhism are written. It starts with either the title of the text as it is translated from Sanskrit to Tibetan, or it starts with an expression of praise in Sanskrit, just to appreciate the source of the teachings. Then it follows with an offering of praise, and then it follows with a promise of composition. Now the author or the writer is taking upon themselves to compose the text. And now the perfect Buddhas, who are the source of all benefit and joy. So why do we exactly refer to enlightened beings as Buddhas, and why do we call them perfect? So a Buddha is understood as a being who has overcome all manners of obscurations and afflictions and have completely perfected all the positive qualities of the mind. So as such, they are enlightened. So as such, they are awakened. So all the perfect Buddhas come into being through accomplishing the sacred Dharma. And the sacred Dharma is accomplished in turn by knowing how to practice the Dharma. So as such, the author writes, I shall now describe the practices of all the Buddha's heirs. Now the Buddha's heirs herein refers to the Bodhisattvas. So in a sense, he's saying, I shall now describe the practices of all the Bodhisattvas.
시당한서 그다 단대 표현한 데에는 저디 자가 나라 맞춤이라고라 시상한서 자가 선지 좀 내대 도지내래 뭐버도 상지 아니jel라 아니 워르나스라서 주고권이라 되네 사자만 보제라 니라 소바다 되네 마뉴네디아다 주고고야다 mam부지도 시당한서 네 제가도 빼 mam부도 근데 인디가라다 먼저기 취에도 맞춤사도 저도 자가 밥이라 먼저 베베기 시에는 자가 밥이로 레고라 파파 따오더니 나가 파바는 mam부 중요해 자가이 계루 mam부 중요해 제당한테 늘레오들 담부 자가 끼들 베베기 대 두부드는 mam부는 여러 가도 주주제 자가끼들 아니 자가끼들 아니 가르가르라게 다 주자 가리나로 앞에 는 것도 제나래 세만나래다 가리네 디기 유제디 자가끼 돈라고 디 가진라고 하려나 로자와는 가든테야지 로아 제가 가서 추에 양다바데 저도 담보 자가는 중어래 계속 로자와다 누주기 다가케바다 표케바니도 빼내 표는처럼 로준치니모 아니 자가케도 장 아니 자가기 케바다 콘도 냠도 진이 주셔라 제 콘도 깔레든지 자와들랑 안도 가든테야지 이라기더라 아니 다 쳐봐줘야라도 고랑이 연대줘야 되라 다들레 구바치바치 아니 좀바 담자라디가라 다 가르라오라나 다 콘조기 단데 주셔지 두저 아니게 단에 마시기이라 지다기 다 칼로 좀바 담자라디 내가 가르치는 수수이 켈렌도 된데질라샤기라
So what we call Tibetan Buddhism really came from India, if we think about it. And the Tibetans, in all the Tibetan Buddhist texts, make it a point to highlight this fact, make it a point to appreciate that the source of these teachings indeed is India, as it is evident by all the Tibetan texts that are translated from ancient India. They always make it a point to highlight the title of the text in the original Sanskrit, in the original language, to appreciate that this indeed comes from India. And we Tibetans call India the land of the Aryas, or Arya Bhumi. Aryas referring to highly enlightened beings. And we call it the land of the Aryas because many of the teachings that survives in Tibetan Buddhism are based on the works of the classical Indian masters. The Tibetans have translated the collection of the works of classical Indian masters, and also the collection of the actual teachings of the Buddha himself, the Buddha's words themselves. So this is why if you read any classical Tibetan text, it always starts with a verse that is written in Sanskrit. And another thing that we make it a point to highlight the title of the text, or express the starting of the verse in the original Sanskrit languages, because it is a way to recollect and appreciate the effort of the translators who took it upon themselves to translate these works. The Tibetan translators went all the way to India in ancient times to learn the language, and then worked with Indian masters to translate these works in Tibetan. And then these are the kind of classical structure that a text follows. It starts with an expression in the original Sanskrit language. Then there is the offering of verse, which helps us to highlight the qualities and the content of the work that is being composed. And then the third is a promise of composition, wherein the author takes it upon themselves to express the determination to see through their composition of the text.
pen ngazu chinju gara da pen de jagan sele jagan ta ngazu pashin ta yang go zugura ta pashi te ande pen jer de ma ma te mo kombai ta tini ma go zung de gala ani ngazu pashin ma go zung ani tambu koran diara jagar ki des abe samay alankara namatanja paramita upate shashata ani pyo ki de la leo ta de la de gala ta tambu go na sarta ti yen yizu de pebe ga ji che da sam sanskrit de da ta ngazu de gela on de karla oras de 디 하로도 가르스다 하임바 하고 마다디 베임바질라 쿠탄다치 고투고 말아 봐 근데 아니 겐도 숨우다 저장 저기 근데 파신로지나 디간라던 샤야디 레자이 끼토나 가네간 레게미 되지 아니 베이킬라 딘데라원 시니마 자한 고츠이다
And when we first came from Tibet and joined the monastic schools, then the first text that we begin study is what we call the Paramita Sutras, the Perfection Sutras. And initially, we also have the same reaction. When we look at how the text begins, then it begins in this manner. In the original Indian language, then it's a long title, like Abhisama, blah 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 blah, a long title in the Indian, even though it's written and transcribed in the Tibetan script, but the title itself is in the original Indian language. And then only after that is specified, then it begins to say, now in the Tibetan language, then it begins to it begins to highlight the topic or the title of the text. And then immediately we have an headache. We are confused immediately. Is this a mantra that the text starts with? And we have a lot of questions. So the teachers begin to explain to us that it is important that we appreciate that the source of the teachings is from India. So as such, even though it exists completely translated in Tibetan, it is important that we Tibetans know the source and always remind ourselves that the teachings come from India. So as such, all the Tibetan translation of the classical Buddhist texts start in this manner, in the original Indian language, then it states the title of the text. And then it also is to help us to appreciate the effort of the translators, that it wasn't readily available in our mother tongue, that it was translated. It comes from the effort of the translators.
제가 드디어 translated 아니 저 전부다 기전부다 가지 되고에나 다나 되게 translate 다가라 차대어라 문에다 나도 같으거든 나로 인지 세랭게만 배 칼로때 스스기 찍장 말이 봐 나랑 삼수도 인지 돌시 등문들아 아니 자주로 전에 야고문다 나랑 시에 있나라 저는 된대서
다디다 주고 말아
예예 하면 되대.
So if we have to appreciate the effort of the classical translators, then maybe it will make sense to appreciate the effort of this translator too.
Yes. That's what I think understood.
Okay, we stop here and break for tea and gather again in half an hour.